legendary battle cruiser, the Revolution. Avrora would find herself in the port of Djibouti, under the cover of dark, on a cold May evening. They tried to slip through the narrow straits of Tsushima. Took 21 direct hits, but they weren't severe enough to hinder her movement. Some of the men had grown fond of Karl Marx's ideas. She would join another training voyage, one she was bound not to finish. During this time, few of the crewmates would join the Bolsheviks, some even becoming party members of RSDRP right after its founding. Accumulated stress led to more disobedience and more buccaneers being sent to prison. An eternal revolution that will last the centuries and achieve utopia on earth. The RSDRP, spearheaded by Vladimir Lenin, would protest, demonstrate, and speak publicly against the Republic, attracting more men to the cause of Bolshevism. The next day, an armed insurrection would not only fight off the government's forces, but also take over key parts of the city. This marked the beginning of the bloodiest civil war on Russian soil. The deafening silence hung around now long abandoned throne room. This eerie silence, however, didn't bother the Red Guardsmen that had bit. Sights, which an ordinary serf couldn't witness during one lifetime, surrounded him. Priceless works of long-dead masters filled his vision, as he gawked at them, tightly gripping his rifle. As he broke out of the trance, he slowly made his way towards the throne room, trampling on the desecrated items. How much blood was spilled for the privileged to adore them and lock them away in their chambers. How much more would be spilled for them to see light once again. The beginning of the Civil War meant that Avrora would get no rest, and she had to partake in raids to help secure Petersburg with the newly formed Red Fleet. In December of 1917, once again her presence was required on the River Neva. Avrora, by that time, had earned a fierce reputation as one of the most loyal ships. Her presence alone would strike fear and hatred in the hearts of the White Guard. In May of 1918, when the threat of losing the city to the enemy was the least of the Council's worries, Aurora's crew was cut in half, and in July 29th, she and other ships from the Baltic Fleet were abandoned at Kronstadt, and the men manning Avrora would be sent to fronts in small groupings. After the end of the Civil War in 1922, she was given another chance to shine. Fully renovated and lacking experienced crew, she was ready to go on one of her most influential training voyages. In July of 1924, Avrora left the port of Kronstadt with optimism, and when they reached the port of Oslo, she met a reception befitting of the symbol of the revolution. The Communist Party of Norway was ecstatic to see the ship's crew in their country, and would shower them with praise and presents alike.
Comrade Red Sailors! The Norwegian Communist Party, on the behalf of the revolutionary proletariat of Norway, wishes you a warm welcome to Oslo. You have arrived here as representatives of the first workers and peasant state, as representatives of the proletariat, which has already destroyed capitalist power and installed a new proletarian power, which, with the hands of the workers and peasants, will destroy the last remnants of the capitalist system and build socialism on its ruins. For the first time since the Great October Revolution of 1917, a Russian military ship arrives in Oslo. For the first time since the Great Revolution of the working class in Russia, a red Soviet flag is waving from a warship in the harbor of Oslo. We greet Avrora with special enthusiasm and wish her a welcome. Working class! Since the entire proletariat knows that the Soviet fleet, together with the Soviet army, is the only armed force striving for peace.
Following their visit in Oslo, they set off to the cold seas of the Arctic, slowly teaching new sailors how to handle equipment. The Avrorans were headed towards Arkhangelsk, a cold Arctic port where it is frozen over half the year, and thus the mighty cruiser didn't linger too long and returned to the Baltic. Once reaching Leningrad, it became apparent that Avrora was very outdated and would no longer be as frequently deployed. Her life in the interwar period consisted of helping the new generation of sailors learn how to use various equipment and undergo minor changes. Avrora with the ship Okean went on 4 training voyages in 1925, 1927, 1929 and 1930. Her time as a service ship was coming to an end. Officially, Avrora was still a training ship in 1939, but almost forgotten by time and the people she served, as she was no longer seen on the battlefields. As a symbol of the revolution, on October 17, 1940, she was given the status of flagship of the Navy. Operation Barbarossa, the biggest land invasion in human history, was a great disaster in the beginning phase for the Soviet High Command. Despite this, the Red Army still managed to hold on to the symbol of communism, Leningrad. On 18th of September 1941, the city of White Knights was surrounded by enemies and the sorrowful siege began. The Soviet High Command grew desperate, using every last weapon to defend the city. Avrora was deployed as a last-ditch effort, taking matters into her own hands and spearheading the defense with the Baltic Fleet. She would bite the enemy at any chance given, taking out tank columns and infantry brigades with heavy artillery fire. Her crews, although, would quickly dwindle in numbers. Sailors dying from direct hits of tank shells, gas bombs falling overhead, and helping the men on the ground to fend off German incursions. At the end of 1941, Aurora's command was only held by a mere 21 men, and in October of the same year, the artillery fire would manage to deal significant damage and breach her armor, causing flooding in the ship. But men would sacrifice themselves to save the ship and keep her afloat by flooding parts of the cruiser. Her battle seemed over, even though she held out so long against such a fierce enemy, and in August of 1943, her flag fell into the cold waters of the Baltic Sea, almost to say that her resolve fell with it. But one surviving sailor would take the flag and hoist it once more on the battered cruiser. On January 27, 1944, the siege of Leningrad was lifted and Avrora was instantly taken into Kronstadt for repairs, and on August 24th, the Executive Committee of Leningrad Soviet ordered that she would be stationed at the River Neva to celebrate her defense of the city. May 9th, 1945. The Germans surrendered. The Soviet flag was flying on the Reichstag, and the world celebrated the end of the European theater. The Nazis were defeated. 6th of November 1947. Aurora would finally find herself on her resting place on the Neva, being decommissioned several days later and officially becoming a museum ship in 1956. Yet, her status as the flagship of the Navy has not been taken away. You could find her still standing in Petersburg and can visit the museum anytime you want. Her legacy as a ship that survived the Battle of Tsushima, the one that began the revolution, the one that defended Leningrad when it was under siege, will be remembered by the people that she inspired. Her significance in the Soviet Union's mythos is bright, and her status as the eternal ship has been, at least in my opinion, solidified. I want to give a massive thank you to Anschluss Time for helping me in all of my videos, editing my scripts with me, and generally being very supportive. And also, October, or Cowboy Himbo, for doing illustrations for the thumbnail and videos. I can't thank them enough for their contribution to this YouTube channel. And finally, I want to thank you, the viewer, for watching my video. See you all in the next one.